Good morning and welcome to our presentation, Geography, Food Production, Diet, and Health Outcomes of the Mediterranean. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Regina Cross. I'm a member of the MSU Alumni Office staff and the director of the Spartan Pathways Travel Program. I'm pleased you've joined us today. A little housekeeping before we get started. The format for this session is a 45-minute presentation followed by Q&A. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation, and you can do so by utilizing the Q&A icon, which is located in the tool ribbon. I'll be collecting the questions, and we'll do our best to address them during the Q&A segment. On to the presentation. Our speaker today is Professor Dr. Zay Ustinol. Dr. Ustinol is the professor of food science and human nutrition at Michigan State University. She teaches dairy processing, food chemistry, principles of food science, and global food systems and health courses. She also has an internationally recognized and respected research program in dairy processing, which is focused on enhancing the value of dairy and dairy-based products. She has received numerous awards, including the Fulbright Senior Research Scholar Award to New Zealand and the American Dairy Science Association Outstanding Teaching Award. She has served as the senior editor and the editor of the highly respected Journal of Dairy Science. She was born in Turkey, grew up in Italy, and speaks 3 languages fluently. In 2010, we were fortunate enough to have her serve as a host of a Spartan Pathways tour to the Greek Isles. Welcome, Zay.
Thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction. And good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. And I'm happy to give this presentation today in the region that I lived at for many, many years, of course, before coming to the US. I think Regina gave a good background. I do have a slide on myself as well, but I'll go through this very quickly. I was born in Ankara, which is Turkey now. The name has been changed from Turkey to Turkey in 2022, I believe. This is official, and Turkey is the internationally recognized name. It is the Turkish word for Turkey. I grew up in Italy. My dad worked in Italy for NATO for over 40 years. That's how we ended up in Italy. I went to high school in Rome, finished high school there, and then came to the US for my undergraduate work. I did my BS and my master's degree at Utah State, and then went on to University of Kentucky for my PhD. I stayed in Kentucky for postdoctoral work, and then came to Michigan State as an assistant professor, and then stayed here ever since. Since then, I moved through the ranks to associate professor and full professor. As Regina mentioned, I have a research program focused on dairy products, and I also have a teaching appointment, and she covered my courses. I did a Fulbright sabbatical in New Zealand at the University of Otago, studying probiotics and health benefits of yogurt. This is actually where I got interested in health aspects of food. So that's a little bit of background. So on to my talk. Here is a map of the Mediterranean. And we tend to think of the Mediterranean countries as being Italy, Greece, but there's 18 countries that surround the Mediterranean. So on the east side, you have Turkey. This is an old map, obviously. Turkey, you got Syria, Lebanon, several North African countries, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. And then on the west side, you have Spain, France, and then, of course, Italy, and then former countries of former Yugoslavia, Greece, and so on. All these countries differ quite a bit in geography and differ quite a bit in economic status and culture and their cuisine, their health and lifestyle, but they do share the principles and pillars of the Mediterranean diet that's common to all of them. And in all of these countries, you have low rates of chronic disease, higher than average adult life expectancy, despite limited access to healthcare in some of the countries, particularly in the North African countries. And you do also observe postponed cognitive decline. So part of this talk is about the climate. So Mediterranean climate is found between 30 and 45 latitude north and south of the equator. And if you're wondering where the equator is, this small map here shows the equator. So Mediterranean climate is unique, not only unique to the Mediterranean, you see some of it in California, and then also part of Australia. But it's a climate, a very mild climate. It has dry summers, sunny dry summers, and mild wet winters and fall, but still quite sunny even in the winter time. So that then this lends itself quite well to grow a whole variety of crops, olives being the main one. Olives have grown in this area for thousands of years. Then, of course, grapes then lends itself well to a vibrant wine industry, tomatoes, citrus, nuts, almonds, pistachios, hazelnuts are common in this region, figs. Artichokes, eggplants, garlics, onions, cherries, pomegranate, zucchini, peppers, a variety of legumes, wheat, grain, rice, and herbs. And then, so these are the traditional crops. More recently, avocados have been grown, are grown in this region, bananas, mangoes, but these have not been the traditional foods of this area. I never saw an avocado growing up. I ate my first avocado actually here in the US. Bananas, we've had bananas, but much smaller in size. And mangoes are fairly new also. And then in terms of animal agriculture, the landscape, particularly rocky areas of Greek islands is suitable for goats. Goats and sheep have been the traditional animals for animal agriculture. And then cows have been introduced, and water buffalo is also common in places like Italy and Turkey. It's desirable because of the higher fat content of its milk. It has significantly higher fat content compared to cow's milk. All right, so what are some key aspects of the Mediterranean diet? What is common in all of these countries that, vary quite a bit in terms of culture and economic status? The diet is, the Mediterranean diet is mostly a plant-based diet. It's high in vegetables, fruits, and grains. It's also abundant in fish because you're by the sea in most cases. And it has quite a bit of fat, but the fat is primarily from extra virgin olive oil, fish, and nuts, and some seeds. There's a variety of fermented foods in the diet. Bread, of course, is important, and then cheeses, yogurt, fermented milk beverages, and so on. Seasonal fruit is an important part of the diet and often is the preferred dessert. In most homes, they'll cut up in the summertime. They'll cut up watermelon or melon and have that for dessert. In the winter, it's like oranges, whatever is in season, and you just have that at the end of a meal. Preferred beverages are water, tea, and coffee. Definitely not Coke, soda, milkshakes. And then wine consumption is in moderation, and this is really more in the Western Mediterranean countries, Spain, France, Italy. In the Eastern Mediterranean, you don't see much or really any wine consumption, or very, very little. And same with Northern African countries. Olives, nuts, seeds, and dried fruit, these are eaten as snacks. And sugar consumption is fairly limited. And growing up, my mom loved Betty Crocker's recipes, and she would use her cookbook to bake. But I remember she would always cut back on the sugar. She would at least half or about half the sugar that was in these recipes. Dishes are often prepared with local seasonal ingredients, a lot of vegetables, herbs, spices. And then the other really important part of a Mediterranean diet is eating together. This is the key foundation of the cultural identity and continuity of communities. And on this slide, on the right side, is the Mediterranean diet pyramid that's put or developed by the World Health Organization, Harvard School of Public Health, and Aldsway Preservation Exchange Trust. So it has physical activity and eating together at a table at the very bottom of the pyramid. Then you have your water, your tea, coffee, beverages, then your grains, fruits, and vegetables as the next level. Then your nuts, legumes, and so on, dairy, fish, and other proteins, eggs, and so on. At the very top is your, well, next to the very top is your processed meats, other meats, and then at the very top is the desserts, the sweets. So very limited. So the Mediterranean diet is also recognized by UNESCO, but they have an interesting, I think, definition of it. They recognize it as an intangible cultural heritage deeply rooted in its geographical origin, whose agricultural and dietary practices have responsible interactions with the environment. So the environment is also an important piece to this. So is it a diet or a lifestyle? Mediterranean diet has no dietary restrictions. There is no weight loss plan. There's no supplements, no special foods you have to buy. As I mentioned, it's different cuisines, but it has some very common cultural aspects. Meals are often planned. I know in Italy, they talk about, you get up and you think about what you're going to have for breakfast, although Italians don't eat a very big breakfast, and you plan your lunch, and then you plan your dinner. A lot of thinking and planning around food and meals. Smaller portions, definitely much smaller than the US, although this is changing somewhat. Much more leisurely eating, mindful eating, and food is meant to be shared with family and friends. So you sit down and have a conversation and enjoy the food with others. The Mediterranean diet or the lifestyle also is a fairly active lifestyle, although there's no required workouts. You're not required to go to the gym for so many hours or do so many steps. But the way I think the cities are set up, they're walkable. And I know when I'm in Europe or in Turkey, I put in about 15,000 steps or more without trying. And here in the US, I really have to make an effort to get that many steps in a day. And sometimes I don't even achieve that. So it's a much more active lifestyle. You spend more time outside. I think the weather allows for that as well because of the milder climate. You can spend more time outside, but I think Mediterranean folks like to be outside. Many like to entertain outside at a restaurant or a coffee shop rather than in the home. As I mentioned, the cities are much more walkable. You have cafes, so it's lends itself well to go out for coffee and drinks and evening walks. When we were growing up in Italy, my parents, every night after dinner, we would just go out for a walk to the city or our town's piazza, and you run into other friends and neighbors and you chat. If it in summertime you have ice cream, walk around some more, and you definitely get some exercise, especially after dinner. And then there's a sense of optimism. I think this is because of connected communities, closeness of families and friends, and so on. So this is all, maybe interesting and nice, but is the Mediterranean diet and health aspects really backed by science? Is it observational, or is there science behind this? Ansel Keys was, I think, the person, him and his wife Margaret were the ones that popularized Mediterranean diet. And this is based on his 7 countries study. He directed the 7 country study, and this is the first multi-country epidemiological longitudinal study that systematically examined the relationship between diet, lifestyle, and coronary heart disease and stroke. And the focus was cardiovascular disease epidemiology and epidemiology of healthy aging. He was funded by a grant from U.S. Public Health Service. The study began in 1958. It followed subjects every year, every 5 years, depending, and there was 50 plus years of follow-up data. It was a large study. It included about 12,763 men, but it was only men, and they were in the ages of the range of 40 to 59. Yeah, so the countries that were included in the 7 country study was US, Finland, Italy, Greece, and former Yugoslavia, Japan, the Netherlands. But some countries had more than one cohort, so there were a total of 16 cohorts. And this was a fairly large study, as I mentioned, and the results were published in hundreds of peer-reviewed publications and books. A lot of data was generated, a lot of publications and books came out of this study. So what was measured? I'm not going to go into all the details of the study, but kind of highlight some key things. So they looked at background info of the participants, demographic, medical history, lifestyle factors, and so on. The physical exams, cardiovascular examination, dietary surveys, healthy aging determinants, and then they had a bunch of tests done on these folks, blood lipids, electrocardiograms, respiratory function, and then there was follow-ups, of course, including mortality follow-ups. And there was because it's, multiple countries, there was a great effort in standardizing the measurements because different people were responsible in collecting data at the different countries to make sure there wasn't variability due to data collection. There was a great effort in standardizing what was being measured, and all of this was developed at University of Minnesota because Ansel Keys was from, he was a physiologist, I believe. He was at University of Minnesota, and his wife was she was a biochemist. She was actively involved in this study. She was actually, I think, collecting most of the data or some of the data. So then what were the findings of the study? So as I mentioned, there was an incredible amount of information that was generated. So some of this may be very obvious to us at this, today, but at that time, this was one of the first study that showed diet, how foods and dietary patterns associated with various outcomes. And they identified risk factors for cardiovascular disease and strokes as high blood pressure, serum cholesterol, and smoking, and elevated mean blood cholesterol levels and intake of saturated fatty acids as key factors in the population burden of atherosclerotic disease. And then lifestyle habits like smoking, alcohol, negatively associated with several health outcomes. But they also observed that individual risk can be changed or at least reduced by diet and lifestyle. And I forgot to mention what really got Ansel Keys to develop his hypothesis about looking at diet and health was in, I think, after World War II. He observed that many men in the US at a very young age, they were dying of heart attacks, and he was puzzled by that. Because at that time, the Western diet was considered to be a very healthy diet, a diet high in protein and meat and milk. Milk was consumed daily in the home. The US was a big milk consuming country. So this was considered to be a superior diet. Yet when he went to Italy, during World War II, he observed that folks had healthier lifestyles, better life expectancy there. So that's how he got interested in looking diet and health and comparing diet of different countries, and that's how he came up with the 7-country study. All right, so then other key findings of the study, then they also reported that dietary patterns of the Mediterranean and Japan in the 60s were associated with low rates of coronary heart disease and all-cause mortality. And their studies in the elderly showed that a healthy diet and lifestyle, sufficient physical activity, non-smoking, moderate alcohol consumption, also associated with low risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. And a healthy diet and sufficient physical activity may also postpone cognitive decline and decrease the risk of depression. So that's the gist of the study and their findings. As I said, there's a lot of information that has come out from the study. If you're interested in this, there's an excellent website. It's the 7countrystudy.com. It goes into great detail and also has the list of publications, books, links to these papers and so on. So I encourage you to look that up if that's of interest to you. So then several other large studies followed. Then there were other studies that actually included women as well. And I think the findings of these studies confirm the results of the 7-country study. Again, it indicated that cigarette smoking is a highly significant predictor of development of coronary heart disease. And there was they also reported there's a correlation between good cardiovascular health and dementia, type 2 diabetes, now cancer, and so on. And cardiovascular risk factors in midlife were significantly associated with cognitive decline, depression, and death later in life. And they also confirmed that individual risk can be changed or at least reduced by diet and lifestyle. So this table here is from this publication by Washfair and Walter Willett. And I think it does a very nice job summarizing the evidence of the Mediterranean diet and health outcomes. So they specifically report on the health outcomes: cardiovascular disease, total mortality, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, overweight, obesity, cancer, and cognitive function. And they summarize the cohort studies as well as intervention studies. And the strength of evidence for all of them ranges from 4, which is equal to convincing, to suggestive in case of total mortality, and I think some cancers, but otherwise the strength of evidence is quite convincing or strongly suggestive. Again, if you're interested in that paper, I'm happy to share that. So as a food scientist, though, I'm more interested in food and food components. And of course, what is it about this diet that makes it healthy and provides all these what I thought which have been shown to be better health outcomes. So here are some key constituents or components of a Mediterranean diet that have been studied. Mediterranean diet is not a low-fat diet for sure. Actually, in some parts of the Mediterranean, they consume up to about 40% fat, 40% olive oil and fish oils and so on. But these are healthy fats. They're primarily monounsaturated fats from olive oil, omega-3 fats from fish oil, and polyunsaturated fats from nuts and seeds. And then it's also a diet very high in antioxidants. It's high in polyphenols because of the olive oil, but also high because it's high in fruits and vegetables and beverages like tea. There's a lot of antioxidants in the diet, and because the food is less processed, the vitamins are higher in the amounts and concentration in the foods. It's a diet high in vitamin E and vitamin C. It's a diet high in fiber because of all the grains, fruits, and vegetables again. And because people spend, I think, a lot of time outdoors, it's also they have adequate levels of vitamin D. We know we are somewhat deficient in vitamin D, particularly here in Michigan. So I want to start with olive oil because olive oil or extra virgin olive oil is the most common to all Mediterranean cuisine, and it's a key to the gastronomical traditions. So olive oil is a native of the Mediterranean, and it's been produced in the Mediterranean region as early as 4000 BC. It's been part of the diet for many, many years. It's been grown in a sustainable manner. These are the countries that are main producers of extra virgin olive oil in the world. Spain is the leader. Italy and Turkey, Tunisia, Greece are major producers of olive oil in the world. And in the US, as you probably guessed, California is a big producer of olive oil because they do have a Mediterranean, what's considered a Mediterranean climate. But then there are other states that produce olive oil as well. Quality of olive oil is influenced by the olive variety and maturation, which then impacts flavor and aroma of the olive oil. So olive oil production, as I mentioned, dates back to 4000 BC. And those of you that have traveled to Europe or will be traveling to Europe, if you go to places like Ephesus, you'll see these very ancient olive crushers and olive oil making equipment. Of course, today olive oil is produced in a much more sanitary fashion, but the principles of olive oil production actually has not changed very much. So in production of extra virgin olive oil, olives are collected, they're milled, they're pressed, and then they're filtered and bottled. So that's your extra virgin olive oil. And then if it's filtered and pressed again, you have your virgin olive oil. Yeah, your virgin olive oil. If it goes through a pressing and then a refining process, refined to remove some of these impurities, then that is just labeled as olive oil. So then today, of course, olive oil production is automated and modernized, but the principles are still the same. This is a cold press, especially extra virgin olive oil is a cold pressed oil that doesn't go through a refining process. So then what makes this unique is because it's a cold press oil and it's not, doesn't go through a refining process, many of the key components that these antioxidants and phenolic compounds remain in the oil. And actually the sensory analysis for evaluating extra virgin olive oil is you slurp it, and if it burns the back of your throat, then it's considered to be high in phenolics, and that's considered to be good olive oil, good extra virgin olive oil. But olive oil, if you're purchasing olive oil, you have to be careful. It is one of the most adulterated food products. In 60 Minutes, I think a while back had a story on this. And extra virgin olive oil is the most common oil that's adulterated. And this is economic fraud. It's unsafe, obviously. So it's really important to also read the labels because olive oil is, and even extra virgin olive oil is often blended with other oils as well. So if you look at this label ingredient list on the very right, it says imported pure olive oil, cold press, extra virgin olive oil, but then it has palm kernel oil, cod oil, and then flaxseed oil added to it, right? So it's definitely blended, mixed with other oils. This one to the next one next right is got sunflower oil and then 20% extra virgin olive oil. This one to the very left, it says olive oil composed of refined olive oil and virgin olive oil, oil comprising exclusively oil that have undergone refining and oils obtained directly from olives, which really doesn't say anything. It's from olives, but then it's undergone refining, so it's probably stripped of all the key healthy phenolic compounds and antioxidants that are important components of extra virgin olive oil. And then this one to the right of that says Greek Kalamata extra virgin olive oil. So it tells you actually the specific olive that it was made from, and it's extra virgin olive oil. So if you're, traveling and you want to buy olive oil and bring olive oil back, clearly you want to check you want to check to see what the olives are in the country, obviously. And I think it's important to check for the harvest date, when the olives were harvested, when the oil was produced. But the other thing to also make sure is olive oil is very susceptible to oxidation. It goes bad very quickly. That make sure that it is in a good container, a good sealed container that blocks light. And then when traveling, clearly keep it in a cool and dark place. And the nose test is always a good test to check for freshness. If it smells like paint, it's probably an oxidized oil. And definitely look for the quality seal. Actually, quality seals are on olive oil from California, as well as olive oil from the Mediterranean. And then olive oil, I think you have to use it up very quickly. As I mentioned, it goes bad fairly quickly, and it's best to use it up, buy it in small quantities and use it up. And if you're shopping for these cute olive oil bottles when traveling, it's best to buy olive oil bottles that block light, and that's going to keep the oil cool. So something ceramic or a tinted glass rather than clear glass. All right, so then how is this different than our vegetable oils? Because our oils like Crisco, these are vegetable oils, polyunsaturated. So, and they're also said to be better than animal fats, for sure. So the big difference is in the processing of these other oils. So in case of other plant oils like soybean oil, corn oil, canola, sunflower, all of these other oils, they go through a much involved processing steps. So the intent is to extract as much of the triacylglycerols or the oil as much as possible, and also remove all the what is considered impurities from that oil. So this just shows soybeans, but this is true for corn and other starting materials. So initially, there are two key steps to processing of other edible plant oils. So in the first phase of oil production, the seeds are crushed and the oil is extracted using hexane, which is a solvent. Solvents like hexane are not used in olive oil production. So the intent is to extract as much of the oil from the pulp after it's pressed, and then hexane is evaporated. And then in the next step, that crude extract goes through a refining process, and the refining involves bleaching and deodorization and degumming and so on to get you this nice, clear oil. That's very bland in flavor. It doesn't have any odors, doesn't impart any flavors while you're cooking. with it. It's just a clear oil. It's polyunsaturated, but it's doesn't have phenolics or other components. They've been stripped during the refining process. So then the other key component of the Mediterranean diet, as I mentioned, is seasonal fresh produce. And I think access to city markets allows for this and makes it quite easy. Many of the European cities, as well as the cities in Turkey and towns, smaller towns and villages as well, there are many markets, even in Florence and in Rome, in these big cities, there's city markets that are open every day from 6, 7 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, where you have ready access to fresh produce, seasonal fresh produce. And then, of course, eating produce that is fruits and vegetables that are in season. It not only provides you with food with better aroma flavor, but these tend to be higher in the key nutrients as well. And these city markets not only have fresh produce, but they also have fish and spices and cheeses and meats and so on. And they're a fun place to go, I think, when traveling. The one in Florence, their main market in Florence at the very top also has restaurants, so you can get lunch, you can get a glass of wine, breads and cheese. It's just fun places. And then you have abundant fresh seafood, especially if you live right by the sea. You can buy the fish right by the water. And fish, we know, is a good source of omega-3 fatty acids, and this has been shown to be good for heart health, brain, and now even eye health. And these are some fish of the Mediterranean, but clearly not a complete list. Yeah, so, and then the Mediterranean diet is definitely not a low-carb diet. Bread is an important part of all Mediterranean cuisines, whether it's the French baguette or the panettone and the rosetta in Italy, or the flatbreads of Turkey, simit of Turkey. Whether it's a loaf or round bread, bread is a very important part of the culture, as well as other carbs like pasta and pizza and noodles, bulgur. These are all rice. These are all important part of the diet, and these grains are important source of fiber. Whole grains are important source of fiber, lignans, and other key nutrients in the diet. And then dairy in limited amounts is also important part of the diet. In this region, they're not milk drinkers. Americans are known to be milk drinkers. In this region, they don't drink milk, but they consume dairy in forms of cheese and yogurt. So cheeses in the western part of the Mediterranean, France, Italy, these countries are known for their wonderful cheeses. Greece, Turkey, Lebanon, these countries, they consume a lot of yogurt. Plain yogurt is used as a sauce for many dishes. And then ayran, which is a yogurt beverage, is very common in Turkey. It's usually drank cold in the summer. It's quite refreshing. And then Lebanon is again another dairy product. So these dairy foods are consumed in various forms. You cook with them, clearly for pasta dishes, but also to make desserts, sweets like cannoli here is in my picture. And then this one with the green pistachios is künefe, a dessert of Turkey. which has got cheese in it, melted cheese. It's delicious. Yeah, so and in just in this region, there's about 400 cheese varieties that we know of. There is probably more that is made regionally that we don't have records of cheese making. And cheese is consumed for breakfast in countries like Turkey, Lebanon. Cheese is consumed for breakfast. This shows a fairly typical Turkish breakfast. And in countries like Italy, France, cheese is often served after a meal with dessert, or in place of dessert with fruit. So they'll bring out like a tray of fruit and some cheeses for dessert, and nuts in some cases. And then herbs and spices is an important part of the cuisine, particularly when you go to the Eastern Mediterranean countries. There's these huge spice bazaars. If you travel to Turkey, the Grand Bazaar has a lot of spices, but then there are bazaars just dedicated to spices. And again, spices, we know they're a good source of phytochemicals and antioxidants. They add flavor, color to foods, but also they reduce the need for salt. When you have flavor in your food, you don't feel the need to add a lot of salt. And then the beverage of choice is usually water. In countries like Italy, if you go to a restaurant, they'll often ask you if you want sparkling water or still water. In the Eastern Mediterranean, it's usually still water. And black tea is a big part of the culture in the Eastern Mediterranean, in countries like Turkey, Lebanon, Syria, North African countries. And black tea is a good source of antioxidants. It's high in phenols and flavonoids and so on. And coffee also is a big part of the culture, whether it's Eastern Mediterranean or Western Mediterranean. Italians are known for their espresso. Turkish coffee looks similar. It tastes different. It's made differently. It's traditionally, it's made with this copper jezve. There's a picture of it on this slide. It's made in this copper jezve, and in Turkey, they will claim that copper is key to good flavored coffee. Tea, I already mentioned, tea is drank in these tulip-shaped clear cups in the Mediterranean region. That's the traditional way of drinking tea. And then red wine, in moderation, has been shown to be high in resveratrol, another important antioxidant that provides various health benefits. So then, how does all this compare to the US, and how are the food systems in the US differ than the Mediterranean and the EU? So I have a few slides talking about this. In my Global Food Systems and Health class, I ask students to compare Mediterranean food systems to US food systems. I think it's important to know and understand this. So in the US, our food is produced by food companies. We have big food processors and food manufacturers. This is the country that, where McDonald's happened, and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Starbucks and so on, amazing food industry. We do have farmers markets, so we have, ready access to fresh produce. We have local foods and artisanal foods. And our food here is protected by trademarks, certifications, and, names of foods are are considered generic. These are generic names, right? When we say feta cheese, we don't really tie it to a specific region. It can be made in Wisconsin, it could be made in Michigan, or it could be made in California. And this is true for Parmesan and even baklava. And even if we say Greek yogurt, when we buy Greek yogurt, we don't think of Greek yogurt being from Greece. Greek yogurt can be made in Idaho. Actually, Chobani's Greek yogurt is made in Idaho. But we have standards of identity, and standards of identity protects the consumer. So when you buy milk, you know that it comes from a cow and it has so many, some certain percentage of fat and protein, or milk solids not fat, and so on. So these are our legal definition of foods, and they're in the Code of Federal Regulation, Title 21, but there's no intellectual property protection on these foods. In the Mediterranean and in the EU, of course, there are food companies and food manufacturers, large ones like Barilla, Ülker, Buitoni, and many other food companies. But there's a greater emphasis for traditional and local foods, and as to how those foods are produced and where they're produced. Probably where and then how it's produced becomes really important. And they also have geographic protection of these foods. These foods are protected by PDOs, protected designation of origin, or PGI, protected geographical indicators. So this is sui generis, and this is intellectual property. These foods are registered. So why is geography important? So why is terroir important? Terroir refers to the soil composition, climate, microclimate, terrain, and tradition of a particular region. It focuses on the natural environment where the climate, rainfall, soil elevation, and land features combine influence the food that's produced. This was initially introduced with French wines. So with French wines, we know that the region, the soil, the rainfall, the climate impacts the grape, and therefore the wine and the distinctive characteristics of that wine. But this is also true for other foods as well. I talked about olive oil, so this is true for olive oil, the soil composition, climate, microclimate, the terrain, and then the tradition of harvesting, crushing, and pressing those olives all impact the distinctive characteristics of that olive oil. This is also true for cheeses. For example, the soil is gonna, and climate is gonna impact the grass that grows, the pasture then the sheep or the goat or the cow grazes on, which is going to impact the milk and the microbiome of that milk, and then the final distinctive characteristics of that cheese. So where does our food come from? So in case of foods in the US, we don't have geographic protection of these foods. When we say sourdough bread, for example, we know that sourdough bread from San Francisco is unique because of the culture and the climate there gives you a unique bread, but we make sourdough bread, and actually became quite popular during COVID. We make sourdough bread in other parts of the country as well. There's no geographic protection provided to sourdough bread, even though we know San Francisco is probably the most best recognized for sourdough bread. In contrast, when you say Altamura bread, you understand this is sourdough bread, but now this is linked to a specific region in Italy. And then not only it's linked to a specific region, but it's also, when you say Altamura bread, it is made with certain flour, and it's made using the traditional process that dates back to 1420, I believe. So it needs to be made with a certain flour. It's again a sourdough culture, so the culture is protected, and it needs to be baked in wood ovens. It needs to be a certain shape, either a loaf or the shape of the head of a priest. I think that's how it goes. And this is true for Manchego cheese, Parmigiano, balsamic, champagne, Kalamata olives, um, hazelnuts of Turkey, saffron of Turkey, baklava, Antep baklava, and so on. So when a food product says Manchego cheese, it needs to be sheep's milk from a specific region in Spain, and even specifies the baskets the curd needs to be placed on, because it gives this very distinctive pattern to the surface of Manchego cheese. Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, it specifies the breeds of cows that you can use the milk from, defines the pasture, and so on. So these are very specific. Balsamic vinegar is the same. It's made only in the Modena region of Italy, and so on. So Dan, how do you identify these foods, or how do you recognize these geographically protected foods? And by the way, these are registered foods. As I mentioned, they're registered with the EU, and every country has their list of protected foods. And Italy, I believe, has like 174. Turkey has 26. Greece has 94, I believe. You can certainly go and look them up and look up like what are specifics that make these foods unique. But if you're at the grocery store, how do you recognize these foods, and how do you, how do you identify them? So they will have this seal, a PDO or a PGI or a TSG seal. So a PDO product is protected designation of origin, is then this seal or this logo indicates that a food is made in a specific region using the traditional methods specified for that food product. It's intended to protect names and quality of agricultural products, foods in the Mediterranean region and the EU. And again, these products must be registered within the EU. Whereas a protected geographical indicator, the PGI, is a little bit looser in that it only requires that one step carried out in the geographic area. And then the traditional specialties guarantee is the TSG logo, which is at the very far right here. Is there's no specific geographical indicator. So it's the loosest in that some traditional methods were followed, but there's no specific geographical connection. So in case of, I think Antep baklava from Turkey was on this list. Antep baklava is a PDO product of Turkey. So it specifies how this phyllo dough needs to be rolled out. It specifies the ingredients. So butter is a key fat that's used. It needs to be made with pistachios, for example. You can't use walnuts or pecans or any other nuts. It specifies it needs to be pistachios. It specifies how it's baked, and so on. So if you make a baklava without following those specifications, it still has pistachios, it would be a TSG. And if it's out of that region. All right, so then how are then geographic indicators or geographic indicator protections different than trademarks? There's some big, I think, differences here. Trademarks belong to a particular company. So in the US, things are protected by trademarks. This is how distinguishes a company's product. There's no connection to a place. So a trademark is assigned or licensed to, can be licensed to anybody and anywhere in the world. And and that company can be anywhere. It's linked to a company or an association, typically. Geographical indicators, these are tied to a specific location, and it can be shared, and it's often shared by all producers in that region. So all the cheesemaker in the Parma region that are making Parmigiano Reggiano, then they have access to the PDO of the product that they make. Yeah, and geographical indicators clearly can't be assigned or licensed to anybody outside of that region. So if you're here in Michigan and you want to make Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, you can't access to that, to the geographical indicator and make a product that's PDO. And then this provides certain association to a particular quality, characteristics, reputation, and so on. All right, so then why the Mediterranean, Europeans and the Mediterranean is big on geographic protection of foods. It's a way of protecting traditional foods of the Mediterranean. It's a link between origin and quality, and I think it establishes a relationship with gastronomy and culinary traditions. And it provides cooperation of individuals operating in one territory and development of rural areas. It provides for transmission of culinary knowledge between generations, and has food as a cultural construction. So clearly Mediterranean food systems also has its challenges. They're complex, and they face challenges like climate change, water scarcity, and biodiversity loss. And then globalization, I think, is everywhere. Western diets seem to be moving in. You have McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken popping up, convenience foods, portions are getting larger. Therefore, there's a shift in diet and lifestyles. So that concludes my slide, and I'll leave you with this particular slide from Eat Lancet Commission on Food, Planet, and Health report. This is Eat Lancet Commission is the leading scientific authority that makes recommendation on healthy diets and a healthy planet. So they've stated in their last report that transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. Global consumption of fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes will have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat, sugar will have to be reduced by more than 50%, and a diet rich in plant-based foods and fewer animal source foods confer both improved health and environmental benefits. So Mediterranean diet, I think, is pretty close to this. If it's not there, it's, I think, closer than other diets, closer to this than other diets, in my opinion. Okay, with that, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes, we do. Actually, we have a few people that have asked questions. Okay, so the first is quickly use olive oil. So what exactly would quickly be in terms of the length that you can keep olive oil?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I definitely would not keep olive oil for years. I would not keep it more than a year for sure.
That's good to know.
Ideally, you want to use it up in like 6 to 8 months.
Good. Okay. So the next question, it says my EVO label says EVO, but then there's a note. Product contains select quality olive oils from the following countries identified in the box below using the following key, which it lists the countries. My bottle contains EVO from Spain, Italy, and Portugal. So my question is, are those countries important to know or not?
Yeah, I think it's important to know. So, Spain, as I mentioned, is a big olive oil producing country. So, um, uh, but if there's a country that is not known for olive oil production, then I would question that. And all of those countries sound like they're major olive oil producing countries. And if it's extra virgin olive oil, if it's labeled extra virgin olive oil, so I'm sure it's extra virgin olive oil. But if you have a country like Finland on there, then maybe that I would be a little bit more suspicious. I mean, I don't want to pick on Finland, obviously, but they don't have the climate. They're not known for olive oil and olive
Okay.
oil production, obviously.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So the next question, are foods with gluten or dairy products processed differently in the Mediterranean countries than in the US? I hear about people who eat gluten or dairy-free who have little to no issues eating those in the Mediterranean countries. Is this simply anecdotal or is there any validity behind this?
So that's a really excellent question. And, we've taken students and to Italy in particular. And we've had a number of students that are gluten-free, but then they were able to eat or tolerate just regular pasta and these foods in Italy. And I'm personally have been very curious about this. And I'm not a plant scientist, so from what I understand and what the Italians have told us is that the way they breed wheat and select um, varieties is different than the practices here in the US. So then that doesn't, I mean, I'm not talking about celiacs in this case. Obviously, that's different, but just intolerance that people tend to be, because of the varieties they select, they tend to be more tolerant. Even folks that are gluten intolerant here are able to eat it, are more tolerant because of um, the varieties that they use. But please don't quote me on this. These are just conversational. But I did do see this with students, and students tell us I can eat pasta here in Italy, no problem. It doesn't bother me. Although they have great gluten-free options in Italy, which I was really surprised. They didn't, when I lived there. But in pretty much every restaurant, you can get a gluten-free option of anything on the menu. And same with Turkey and other countries. Dairy, it's the other part of that question was dairy. So, there are two things with dairy. There's milk allergies, clearly, which is different than lactose intolerance. So lactose intolerance is inability to digest lactose. And in case of many fermented dairy foods, lactose is broken down because that's what lactic acid bacteria use as their food, as their carbohydrate source is lactose. So once lactose is broken down, metabolized to lactic acid and and to other things, flavor compounds and so on, lactose isn't there to give you GI discomfort.
All right. The next question, does it extend the freshness of olive oil by keeping it in the refrigerator?
I wouldn't recommend putting olive oil in the refrigerator. The reason being it's a monounsaturated fat. And being a monounsaturated fat, it has a fairly um, high melting point. So it's liquid at room temperature. No, high or yeah, high. Eh, I'm confusing myself. But if you put olive oil in the refrigerator, it's going to solidify.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you're going to end up with a solid fat, and then, it's not gonna be able to pour it. And of course, you can warm it up and bring it to room temperature, but then every time you warm it and cool it, warm it and cool it, it's undergoing temperature fluctuations, and basically it's being abused.
All right. Do you see the US moving in the direction of establishing PDO, PGI, or TSG?
Yeah, I do. There is some movement in that direction. I think there is some interest with California wines. California do want to protect their wines and have regional protection. Uh, there was, and I haven't followed up, there was some movement with tequila. Mexico, I think, is interested in protecting tequila. Um, I mean, in Michigan, I think we should protect Michigan cherries personally. I think we should, yeah, get into regional protection of foods here in the US. But having said that, Americans, I mean, up to this point, they haven't been very respectful of PDO and PGI labels, right? We make Parmesan cheese here and call it Parmigiano Reggiano. Italians are horrified. or or feta, or we make brie and call it brie cheese, and it's made in Wisconsin, right? It kind of horrifies Europeans. Um, yeah, but I think Americans are interested in protecting a number of US foods.
Okay, so I have some questions regarding the seven country study. So, what years did Ansel Keys conduct that study?
I'm sorry?
What years did Ansel Key conduct the seven country study?
I think it started in 1958 and it ended in 78, but it
Okay,
was kind of the basis to many other studies that followed that looked at diet and health, but I think those are the dates.
all right. And did he live long?
Yes, he lived to be 100.
Wow.
He died, yeah, he was 100 years old when he died.
Oh, gosh. All right. And along that same line, are the seven countries of the study the same as what's considered the blue zones?
So the 7 countries study is different than the blue zones. And blue zones are, these are really not countries, but they're regions. And there's 5 of them, I think. There's observational data from. So there's Okinawa, Japan, Icaria, Greece. So these are very specific areas. Sardinia, Italy is one of the blue zones. And then Loma Linda, California, a place in Costa Rica as well. So they're different than the 7 countries that were studied by Ansel Keys.
Okay, another question. Are there regions in the US that are similar to is it terroir of the Mediterranean?
Probably California comes closest. So, California, I think I showed you on that map that showed the Mediterranean climate. I can go back to it. Sorry, this is taking so long. Here we go. So, this is what's defined as the Mediterranean climate is there's areas that are found between 30 and 45 latitude. And California definitely has got a piece that's, or maybe all of it is considered the Mediterranean climate. So then, the climate lends itself well to olive production and olive oil production, and then wines very similar to the Mediterranean. So yeah, I think it would be considered like a terroir because the climate, the soil, the region impacts production of the olives or the grapes, and then but winemaking in California is quite different than winemaking in Europe or cheese making or olive oil production. So then that will impart the unique characteristics to California wines, California cheeses, California olive oil. And California olive oil is actually very, very good.
Okay.
Extra
All right.
virgin olive oil.
Mhm. Okay, and then our last question. Can you get the benefits of a Mediterranean diet living in Michigan?
I think so. I mean, a plant-based diet, of course, the diet itself, but then, as I mentioned, it's also a lifestyle, and the climate in Michigan doesn't lend itself very well, being outdoors all year round, and, and the way our cities are set up and our towns are set up, it doesn't really lend itself well to walk to the city plaza, I guess, for an evening stroll to get ice cream or whatever. And then sunshine, I think most of us are vitamin D deficient in Michigan because we don't get enough sunshine.
All right. Well, thank you, Zay, for presenting on this fascinating topic, which aligns beautifully with regions we explore on many of our Spartan Pathways tours. So, Zay, if you want to stop sharing your screen, and then I have one that I'd like to share.
Yeah, sorry, let me just figure this out.
All right.
Okay, did that stop sharing?
Yes, it did.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So if Zay's presentation has inspired you to visit the Mediterranean, we're excited to offer a Spartan Pathways tour next year called Legendary Turkey. From June 6th to the 20th, organized by our tour operator, Odysseys Unlimited. This journey will take you through Turkey's captivating cities, from the historic wonders of Istanbul to the stunning Turkish coast. Highlights include the breathtaking sights of Istanbul, the ancient city of Ephesus and nearby Kusadasi, the vibrant coastal town of Antalya, and much more. In Istanbul, your senses will come alive as you hear the call to prayer echoing through the lively streets. You'll marvel at the iconic Blue Mosque with its 20,000 blue tiles, enjoy a private cruise on the Bosphorus waterway that separates Europe from Asia, and explore the spice market and Grand Bazaar that Zay had mentioned. Nearby in Kusadasi, you'll tour Ephesus, one of the world's best preserved ancient cities, where the terrace houses display mosaic floors and frescoed walls. In Anatolia, you'll explore the Archaeological Museum, home to a remarkable collection of priceless artifacts. This is just a snippet of what's included. I had the pleasure on going on a similar tour to Turkey with Odysseys Unlimited last year, and it really exceeded my expectations. Every day was just filled with great experiences. The people were warm and welcoming, and the food was just really delicious. And I'm pleased to share with you that if we have the necessary number sign up, Zay has agreed to serve as the MSU host and share her knowledge of this wonderful country. So for more information on this tour or any of our other over 50 tours, Spartan Pathways tours, please visit alumni.msu.edu/travel, or you may call us at 888-697-2863. Thank you again, Zay, for this wonderful presentation. We
Of
hope you've
course.
enjoyed the presentation today. Also, this session is being recorded, and I will share the link with you in a follow-up email. If I can answer any questions in the future, please let me know. Thank you for joining us, and go green.
Go white. Thank you.